Hi, I'm going to talk about some books that I have read in 2021 and 2022 because I have been thinking about them lately. I really want to reread them, but I have at least 80 physical books that I already own and I haven't read. I need to prioritize them because they've been with me for 2 to 3 years and I just need to read them. These books are the ones that I've read in 2021 and 2022. The first one that I want to talk about is Every Note Played by Lisa Genova. Lisa Genova is a neuroscientist and this tackles ALS. So the main characters are ex-husband and wife. They were both skilled pianists. The wife was not able to pursue a career as a professional pianist. She's a piano teacher, but the husband became a world-renowned pianist. They separated, I don't know how long after them separating that the husband was diagnosed with ALS, and the first part of his body that got paralyzed was his right hand, right arm. And so he couldn't play anymore. And this story deals with the events that happens after that. So as I mentioned, they're separated, but the husband doesn't have anyone else to take care of him, and so he had no choice but to ask help from his ex-wife. It sounds like a soap opera, because I had to read the synopsis from the back just to refresh my memory, but I just remember the feeling that I had when I read it for the first time. It felt so real, and I think it was the first book that made me weep. It's embarrassing, really, weeping from a book, but it was just so emotional and I'll never forget it. The second book that I want to talk about is If Not Winter, Fragments of Sappho, and this is a collection of fragments that people have found or discovered of Sappho's poetry. Sappho created lyric poetry, which are poems that are meant to be sung. I love this book so much that I made a video just for it so I could explore the history of Sappho and also tell you what my favorite fragments from this collection are. The next book that I want to talk about is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. When I first read it, I used the Chiltern Classics edition. So this is the Chiltern Classics edition of Wuthering Heights. This is the one that I used when I first read this story, and as you can see, I have a lot of tabs because there are so many beautiful quotes in this book. And yes, the characters were insufferable, which I hate. There's just something in this that made me like it. I remember when I finished reading this book thinking that they're so unlikable, but as time went on, I realized that I love it, that it made my top 10 list of that year. Whenever I read it, I don't remember. But I decided to get the PEL, or the Penguin English Library edition of this book, so that I could annotate it. But a side note, when I read Madame Bovary, which I also have in this edition, I have a lot of tabs that I used here as well because I highlighted a lot. I actually wrote on this book even though the paper is glossy. I don't know if you can see that. I know the characters are insufferable. I know that it doesn't have a happy ending, but I want to read it from the beginning just so I could get to that part where he says, "You said I killed you, haunt me then." I just remember the feeling of reading that for the first time, and it was just so... It's as if I was Catherine's ghost, that someone said that to me. It just pierced my heart. So I just want to read it to get to that moment and then finish reading it again and see if I still love it. I saw one booktuber that I love, and I was watching her backlist videos, and she said that she hated this as well as Fahrenheit 451, which broke my heart because I love this book and Fahrenheit 451. People have different opinions. The next book that I want to talk about is Love Poems by Alexander Pushkin. So I have the Alma Classics edition of this book, and this collection is not great. You won't find, at least I didn't find each poem to be incredible, and I didn't relate to all of it. I didn't fall in love with all of it. But there's this one poem, it's called A Confession, and I love it because of the first line. I love you, even though insane. I love that first line. I'll read the first stanza. I love you even though insane, though plagued by pointless shame and pain. And, wretched in this foolishness, I kneel before you and confess. It's beautiful in literature, but I don't think it is in real life. I don't want to reread this soon, but I think I'll just check out some poems. I think I saw some tabs inside, and I think I'll just read those. The next book that I want to talk about is The Great Unexpected by Dan Mooney. I don't know anyone who's mentioned this book, and I find that unbelievable because I love this so much. This is about an old man in a care facility for the elders, and he was with his wife, but sadly his wife passed away, and so he's just lonely. And I'm blanking on the name, and he hates that he's constantly being told what to do, when to eat, where to go, where not to go, until this literary colorful character there's no way that it will focus. You can just see whatever. So this colorful character comes into Joel's life. So the main character is Joel, and then comes Frank. So he was a former theater actor, I think, and he just makes everything better. So we see the clash of their personalities, and then of course they click and they develop a friendship, and it's just so beautiful and so heartwarming. If you're looking for a heartwarming read, which actually also made me cry, it made me weep, I would recommend this book. And I just remember this thing when I was reading this. Before I finished reading this, I realized that the whole time that I was reading it, I had Fred Astaire's face in my head when Frank was speaking. So I just thought it was cool. Because whenever I read, everyone's just faceless, even though they are described, the color of their hair, their eyes, blah, blah, blah. What I remember of them are their traits. Are they annoying? Are they smart? Are they kind of dumb? So that's their personality is what I remember, and not how they look. So I just thought that it was great and kind of funny that I had Fred Astaire's face in my head while reading this book. The next book that I want to talk about is probably the best novel for me, and it's Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. So this is the Penguin English Library edition, and it is just so incredibly sad. I don't remember crying, like actually weeping from this, but the story is just so heartbreaking that I want to reread it. Not because of the loneliness that it will make me feel, but because of the writing. Because I first read it on my ebook reader while listening to the audiobook. And so I highlighted a lot of texts, but I'm too lazy to check out the note highlights of it. So I decided to get a paperback copy of it. And so I want to reread it just to highlight everything and just to feel everything for Tess again. Because it is just so beautifully written and so tragic, but so powerful, and I just love it. So it's about Tess and her life, what the people around her has done to impact her life, and the repercussions of her decision with that other character. It's sad, it's beautiful, I love it. The next book that I want to talk about is The Suitcase by Sergei Dovlatov. It's an Alma Classics edition, and this is about a man who checks out his closet and sees at the bottom a suitcase, and he opens it and sees all the stuff in it and tells us a story that he remembers from each piece of object that is in the suitcase. I think the story behind the suitcase is that it's the only thing that he had when he migrated to, I don't remember, but it's just so, well, the history why he had to move is tragic, and each story tells us a bit about the history of the time, and also they are so funny. It was so brilliantly written, and I don't know how many times I've mentioned that line that made me laugh. And he climbed out the window even though he could have easily used the door. I find that so funny. I want to reread this soon. Okay, so we are going to the sad books. I've mentioned sad books before, but this is also sad. It's Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I read it from an ebook reader years ago, and I remember feeling and thinking that this book will be on my top 5 list. This has a secured position because it's just so sad. It's so sad, and it's James Baldwin, so obviously it's beautifully written. The 9th book that I want to talk about is Stoner by John Williams. So this is the NYRB edition, and as I mentioned before, I like these editions because of the different colors inside and also the thick paper. The font size is also decent. When I first read it, it was through the audiobook from Audible Plus, and I just remember listening to the story. It's kind of an apt format because it's about the life of John Stoner from his childhood to old age. I just remember the professor bit and the end bit, and I didn't cry when I read it, but when I was trying to collect my thoughts on it, I shed a tear. I shed some tears because it was sad. He just felt like someone I knew and that I connected with and that I understood, and so when what happened, it was sad. And I know that this is one of those books that a lot of people love. So I think you've already seen this or already have read it. I hope you loved it too. Okay, so the last book that I want to reread and want to recommend to you is my favorite book of all time. And it is The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers. I have the Penguin Modern Classics edition, but when I read it years ago, I used an ebook and I listened to the audiobook while reading it. So this is the story of John Singer. He is a deaf person, and the story revolves around him and 4 acquaintances who confide in him. They find him sympathetic and just a good companion, and what they really do is they vent on him. They tell him about their lives, their frustrations, their dreams, and I think this deals with the consequence of being that person that everyone goes to, being that person that they think will always be there for them. I suppose it's emotional support, and neglecting that that person is also singular, also has their own issues, their own hopes and regrets. And I just love this story. It's so sad. I didn't think that what happened would happen. I just love it for that. And I think the last paragraph or 2 in this novel is just killer. It's incredible. Also, when I looked it up, the title is from a poem by William Sharp called The Lonely Hunter, and the line where Carson got the title is, "Deep in the heart of summer, sweet is life to me still, but my heart is a lonely hunter that hunts on a lonely hill." So everything about that and the story and the writing is just beautiful. I just love it. It's still my favorite book to this day, which might change soon or which might stay forever. Who knows? We'll see. So these are the 10 books that I want to reread because I love them so much. I just think that I would recommend them to you. Perhaps you haven't read any of them or some of them. Maybe you want to give them a try. That's all for now. Thank you so much for being here.